And we're back, folks, right here on WrestleRant. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and every single Tuesday right here on the show, I break down all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network. Today, we're talking In Your House 17 Ground Zero from September of 1997. So we kick off the show with Brian Pillman and Goldust going at it in the opener. This whole story stemmed from Brian Pillman claiming that the kid that Goldust and Marlena had, a real-life couple, obviously, was his own, that he was the father of Goldust Kid. You know, some very storyline, all this other level bullshit that you would see in just other soap operas and other garbage like that. So you could pretty much tell who was writing the storylines at this time, Vince Russo. So it was not the most traditional wrestling storyline, not the most compelling storyline, but it was what it was. The match they had at SummerSlam the month prior was fucking garbage. This was alright, though. This was a decent match. It would turn out to be Pillman's last pay-per-view match ever for WWE. He would pass away on the Sunday of Bad Blood the following month, oddly enough. So this would be, this match is notable for that, a match that really was not all that good, but it was all right. I mean, it was decent, again, better than their SummerSlam train wreck. But in the end, it was Pillman emerging victorious after Marlena attempted to interfere, hitting Pillman with the pocketbook. He took the pocketbook, hit Goldust with it, and emerged victorious in that fashion. So Pillman goes over, wins in his final pay-per-view match ever. After that, it was Brian Christopher taking on Scott Putski in a light heavyweight match. Brian Christopher, obviously later known as Grandmaster Sexay, and Scott Putski, literally no idea who this guy was. Why he was classified as a light heavyweight, I'll never know. This guy was obviously jacked up on roids. You could tell just by looking at him. But the match ended 5 minutes in when Scott Putski got injured on the outside. He really hurt his knee. So he was legitimately hurt. His career ended there, and that was it. Scott Putski was never seen again in WWE. So again, I had never seen him prior to this point, never seen him since. The match was whatever in the time that it lasted. Sexay went over, and they didn't really outright admitted that Lawler was the father of Brian Christopher, of Grandmaster Sexay. He would strongly suggest it, but that he never outright admitted it, interestingly enough. So anyway, all right match, marred by an unfortunate finish. After that, we had Savio Vega taking on Crush and Farooq in a triple threat match. So the story here stems from all three men obviously were original members of the Nation of Domination. Savio Vega went off and formed Los Boricuas, or however the fuck you pronounce it. Crush went off and formed the Disciples of Apocalypse, and Farooq remained with the Nation of Domination. One of the more boring triple threat matches I have probably ever seen. This was just really no good whatsoever. The story sucked. No one gave a shit. Farooq and Crush had somewhat of a following. Farooq was obviously already established. Crush kind of broke out on his own. Savio Vega by this point had no fan following whatsoever, but they had him go over. So that really made no sense. The match was boring as shit. Wrong outcome. Just was not a fan of this at all. After that, we had a light heavyweight match, a minis match, I guess as you would call it. Max Mini and El Torito, not the El Torito that we would come to know many years later with Los Matadores. Maybe that was his father, I'm not really sure, or his son, whatever. This was another El Torito taking on Max Mini. In a really fun match. Honestly, a really well-wrestled match. There were some silly parts of it, with I think it was Max Mini biting the referee, and the referee would chase him around the ring, and all that other silly shit. But I thought it worked. I mean, the crowd ate it up. They were kind of lively for this. Not really, but they were into some spots. And they pulled off a lot of cool shit. So if they really took this stuff seriously and went, full throttle with it, it might have been something of note, but they never really did. It fizzled out and that was it. But this was fun for what it was worth, though. After that, a four-way elimination tag team title match to crown new WWF Tag Team Champions. It was the Headbangers taking on the Legion of Doom, the Godwins, and Owen Hart and the British Bulldog. So to offer some context here, earlier in the evening, Stone Cold Steve Austin had to vacate both one half of his tag titles and the Intercontinental Championship to the Commissioner Sergeant Slaughter and Jim Ross as a result of his injury from Owen Hart at SummerSlam a couple weeks prior. So he vacated both belts, but in doing so, he stunned Jim Ross. He flipped off Sergeant Slaughter, typical Stone Cold Steve Austin fashion. But, so, of course, as I had said, he had vacated the tag team titles. New tag team champions were crowned on this show, and the Headbangers were put in the spot of Dude Love and Stone Cold Steve Austin. It was a fatal four-way elimination tag team title match. They got a bunch of time, almost 20 minutes. Not that really good of a match at all. Bulldog and Owen Hart, who were the saving graces of this match, were not in there until the very, very end, so a majority of the match is not good whatsoever. Legion of Doom was the first team gone. They got themselves intentionally disqualified. I mean, they used the buckets on the Godwins, their own buckets on them, so I guess they must have known they were going to get DQ'd. I don't really know. The Godwins were the next one gone, or the next one's gone, and it comes down to the Headbangers, Owen Hart and British Bulldog. Owen Hart and Bulldog seemingly have the match won before Stone Cold Steve Austin comes out, lays out Owen Hart. Of course, it was Owen Hart that injured him in the first place, so it made sense from a storyline standpoint. And the Headbangers emerged victorious, the new WWF Tag Team Champions. A cool moment. Their reign went nowhere. Very, very forgettable, but it was still a cool moment for what it was at that time. From there, we had the WWF Championship match. The Patriot going for the gold against Bret Hart. And a pretty good match. I mean, the Patriot did not last long in WWE. I think he only was really in there for this Bret Hart storyline as Mr. USA. I think the only thing that the Patriot... I think his name is Del Wilkes under the mask. The only thing he was ever really notable for during his WWE tenure as the Patriot was using what would become later known as Kurt Angle's theme song 2 years later. A great theme, even 20 years after the fact. But yeah, it was actually a pretty good match. I was surprised by how good this was. It was obviously a filler feud for Bret Hart before he went back after either The Undertaker or Shawn Michaels. But it was still a pretty well-wrestled match. Both guys played their roles really well, especially the Patriot. By far the best match he had in WWE before he would leave, a short time later, whatever. But this was pretty good. He had interference from, I think, Vader and maybe either Owen Hart or Bulldog. There was interference here that would cost the Patriot the match and help Bret Hart retain his title. So a pretty good match and a lot better than I thought it would be, honestly. And then we get to the main event, Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker before the Hell in a Cell match at Bad Blood the following month. We had these two going one-on-one on this show. They brawled for a solid 15 minutes before the match even began, went for 15 minutes in the ring, and then all hell broke loose. They just beat the shit out of the referees. They beat the shit out of each other. It was a good match, but I thought the chaotic feel that it had really made it that much more exciting for the fans and those watching at home, which was what really made it a remarkable main event despite the fact it ended in a no contest. Obviously, the fans in attendance weren't a fan of that outcome, but it would set the stage for a much-needed Hell in a Cell match the following month, as I had said, at Bad Blood in early October. So this made perfect sense. I mean, again, typically I'm not a fan of them closing out a show with a match that doesn't have a definitive conclusion, but this was so exciting. The fans were into it. They fucking love Shawn Michaels and Taker, the whole feud they had going there. They ate this shit up, so I thought it was a great way to go out, to go out the show. And as they had said, kind of plant the seeds for what would become the first ever Hell in a Cell match at Bad Blood the next month. So I thought this was great. A really, really fun show closing angle between Michaels and Taker. And really, that's about it. The final two matches were the only matches worth watching from this show. The entire undercard pretty much sucked. Max Mini Nel Torito, was better than I thought it would be. Nothing completely meaningful or whatever, but it was a fun match. The tag title match was very boring up until the end. The triple threat match sucked. Christopher and Putski was completely forgettable, and the opener was decent. So overall, I'll put thumbs in the middle because those last two matches I thought were really, really good and really made the show worth watching, which was kind of the case for a lot of Attitude Era pay-per-views in 97, 98, and 99 was the main event saving the show, in my opinion, just the way that I feel. But and also the Stone Cold Steve Austin segment with the Commissioner and Jim Ross and him stunning him and planting the seeds for what would become the iconic feud between Austin and McMahon. So again, a middle-of-the-road show. I can't say it's completely just a total waste of time, simply because you did have those two main events in that Stone Cold Steve Austin segment, but I'll just say the entire event is not worth watching. Simply check out those final two matches, as well as the Stone Cold Steve Austin promo, and that's about it. So that is the In Your House 17 Ground Zero pay-per-view, guys, as seen on the WWE Network from September of 97. Coming up in coming weeks, we've got my Extreme Rules review of the 2016 event. We've got In Your House, Bad Blood from October 97, my Money in the Bank 2016 review, and also In Your House, D-Generation X from December of 1997. And that will wrap up every pay-per-view on the network that is not from the past year or so. And after I've watched D-Generation X In Your House, I've seen officially every pay-per-view ever on the network, which is incredible. So And we'll get to that when we get to it in the weeks ahead. So in the meantime and in between time, guys, as always, be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, subscribe to the channel. Content goes up every single fucking day. So I appreciate your support. Check everything else out on the channel. Have an awesome week, and I'll catch you guys down the road.